It's going to start the recording now. Yeah. I also wanted to ask, just so that we have all our records straight, if at some point during the meeting, everybody could just type their name in the chat and what town you're from, that would be really helpful to us. Okay, so I'm serving as the project leader for the regional MVP Suasco Natural Climate Solutions Project. I want to thank everybody for coming. We're really excited that you're all here. This is our first core team meeting. And I just wanted to explain, because there are two acronyms in our project name and not everybody might know what everything means. So MVP is the Municipal Vulnerabilities Preparedness Program, which is a state program that focuses on community vulnerabilities such as drought, flooding, and extreme heat that are caused or worsened by climate change. And grants are available through the program for projects that serve to better prepare municipalities to handle these vulnerabilities, such as this project we're doing right now. And Suasco stands for Sudbury, Assabet, and Concord, and it refers to the watershed for these three rivers. The watershed is the area that drains to the rivers, and this watershed includes 36 cities and towns, and 3 of them are part of this regional grant: Framingham, Natick, and Hudson. And besides being part of the same watershed, these 3 municipalities also all contain environmental justice, or EJ, populations, which are disadvantaged communities that are disproportionately impacted by climate change issues. So our project has a particular focus on representation of EJ communities. And the purpose of the project is to identify locations in the 3 towns that are impacted by climate change and to propose natural solutions, which we also may be calling nature-based solutions, or NBS, and to help alleviate the impacts. So the result of the project will be a prioritized set of nature-based solution ideas with preliminary scopes of work and costs for each of the identified sites. And that material will allow the communities to respond quickly to future grant opportunities. And all this will be explained in much more detail during the rest of the meeting. So now I'm going to hand the meeting over to our consultants, who are guiding us through the process of identifying areas in the 3 municipalities that are impacted by climate change and proposing the nature-based solutions. So I'd like to introduce Jim Newman from Linnean Solutions, which is the consulting group that's leading the public engagement aspect of the project. So thanks, Jim.
Thanks a lot, Pam. Go ahead, Jillian, why don't you go ahead and fire up some slides. We're going to blast some slides at you for a little while, but there's a lot of opportunity to talk and think.
Jim,
yep.
did we want to, Jim and Pam, did we want to just introduce the municipal team and the consulting team, and then some of the folks?
Yep. Yeah. Just a moment. Okay. And so as we go along, there are a couple of things that are really valuable to remember. So one of them is, you can easily raise your hand if you can pull that off, and we'll recognize you. We'll stop what we're doing and recognize you. You can also put stuff in the chat. We are watching the chat. There are going to be some questions. You can answer questions in the chat. You can pose questions in the chat. We're going to be looking at it, keeping track of it, so that if people want to have something to say or want to make a comment, it's a great place to do it. We'll also have plenty of opportunities where we ask specifically for thoughts and comments, and there'll be lots of opportunity to do that. We will, however, also, there's a lot of information that happens here. And so we're gonna be at it for a little while, so feel free to interrupt us if you have questions. So as Jillian said, let's do a quick little set of introductions for, yeah, I am referring to the raise hand action. That makes it easier for us to see you rather than raising your hand like that, which you may be off screen when we're sharing slides. If we're all in this group, yeah, then we can do that. So I'm going to start by just introducing, so Pam, actually, Pam, maybe you can start by introducing folks from Hudson, and then Jillian or Claire can introduce folks from Natick, and maybe Sean can introduce, or Dominic can introduce folks from Framingham.
Okay, well, if you're talking about staff,
Yes.
Jim, I'm the only staff from Hudson.
Great. Okay, well, that makes it easy.
Okay, all right.
Claire or Jillian, you want to introduce folks from Natick?
I can start. I'm Jillian Wilson. I'm the Sustainability Director for the town of Natick. I see a lot of Natick faces on here, so thank you so much for being a part of this. And thanks to everyone organizing this and the other members of our regional watershed for being on. Claire.
Hi everyone, I'm Claire Deli, the conservation agent for the town of Natick. Thank you to Chris, who's one of our Concom members who I see is here tonight. We're really looking forward to sort of kicking this off with you all.
Fantastic. And maybe Dominic, if you want to introduce folks from Framingham.
Hi,
Sure.
I'm Deborah Mitchell from Natick Black Lives Matter.
Oh, fabulous.
I'm sorry.
Hi,
I
Deb.
I don't want to interrupt, but yeah, I didn't want you to miss me because you're
Good
going
place to interrupt.
going to another town.
All right.
All right, I'm Dominic Portelli. I'm the Assistant Conservation Administrator in Framingham. I'll pass it over to you, Sean.
Thanks, Dom. Sean Luz, Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Framingham. I know Sarkey, I believe, is going to be joining us when he gets a chance, and our Senior Stormwater Engineer, Allison Elliott, couldn't make it tonight, but she's looking forward to the next meeting as well. And I just want to call out too, we have a member of our Sustainability Committee, Sean, here as well. So thanks for being here, Sean. Thanks.
Hi,
well,
Sean
let's-
Billard. Oh, Sean
I'm
Billard
sorry.
from Framingham Sustainability Committee. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. If we're introducing committee members, I do have my one of our conservation committee members, Brooke Warrington, is here. So I didn't want to miss her. Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
That's awesome. We also have a couple of sort of esteemed guests. Fantastic, Deb, for joining us, Deb Mitchell from Natick Black Lives Matter. Allison Field Juma, you want to quick say hi?
Sure,
you're
thanks.
reading?
Yeah, I'm Executive Director of OARS. We're the watershed organization for the Sudbury, Assabet, and Concord rivers. And another staff member, Heather Conkerton, is with us tonight. She's our Ecological Restoration Coordinator. And we are, working with the town of Stowe, had started a Suasco Climate Resiliency Coalition, which is a coalition across the whole watershed of municipalities and nonprofits working together to try to deal with transboundary, to build transboundary climate resiliency, since water and air tends not to observe municipal boundaries. And we're really happy to be part of this team in whatever way we can be.
Fabulous. Thank you, Allison. And a special thanks to Andre Strong Bearheart Games for joining us tonight. Andre, you want to say hi for a sec?
Yeah, good evening. My name is Andre Strong Bearheart from the Nipmuc community, and as a cultural steward, I move throughout our whole territory as far east as Natick and Magunkaquag, which they call Framingham now, up into Agawam, Springfield area, and all the way down into Wabaquasit territory, which is North Rhode Island. And so as a cultural steward, I oversee a lot of territory, fighting for cultural inventory and food sustainability, food sovereignty, and cultural revitalization and preservation. So glad to be here and hear what's going on in the communities in our territory. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Andre. Fantastic. Also, I'd like to just make a note about David Gray from the Lake Boone Association. You can say hi, David, if you want.
Yeah, I actually live in Stowe, but our lake association covers Hudson as well.
Fantastic.
Oh, and Jim, we also have Tom Green from Hudson, and he represents the Land Trust Green Hudson. He also has been running the Bike and Ped Commission, so he's involved in a lot of ways in the community too.
Fantastic. That's great.
Pam, I'm here too from Hudson. I didn't expect you, Jeanette Millard.
Oh, Jeanette, I'm sorry. I didn't think you were coming to this to the first meeting. I'm really glad you're here.
Yeah.
Jeanette, so Jeanette is also representing from Green Hudson, and she's also very active in the town.
Fantastic. Deb, would you like to introduce yourself? You quickly said hi earlier. Deb Mitchell.
Hi, I'm Deb Mitchell with the climate committee that with Jillian Wilson Martin. We did a whole bunch of surveys and all that stuff. So
Fantastic.
my name, Deborah Mitchell from Natick. I do a lot of Zoom meetings and stuff in Natick. A lot of things. So we're doing Juneteenth and stuff like that. So it's good to be here. Thanks.
Well, thanks. It's great for you to join us. Thanks a ton.
Thanks a ton.
I'm not going to introduce everybody. I will introduce one other quick person before we do a quick round through the consultants. There's kind of a pile of consultants on this call, so we're going to have everybody raise their hand or at least say hi so that they pop up on your screen when we go through it. I will first introduce Hillary King, who is representing the MVP program and is the funder for this project. Hillary, you want to quick say hi?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So glad to see such a great big wide variety of people in this group, and look forward to hearing and learning from this process. And yeah, I know several of you from other projects already, but yeah, always enjoy hearing and learning from you all. So thanks for this effort. And
fantastic, Hillary. Thanks a ton. Oop, my dog has something to say too. Oh, and Kevin. Great. Kevin, you want to quick say hi? No, I'll say hi for Kevin. So Kevin Hollenbeck has joined us from DCR as well, which is great. And also, I'd just like to note that Sarkis has joined. Sarki, you want to quick say hi?
Good evening, everyone. Sarkis Sarkeesian from the City of Framingham, Director of Planning and Community Development.
Great, thanks a lot. And I'm sure I've missed some folks. So feel free to just make a note if in the chat, everybody sort of already popped their names in. Alyssa, you want to say something?
Sure. I'm Elisa Landry. I'm Community Advocacy and Engagement Manager for Mass Audubon, and I'm very happy to be joining you this evening.
Fantastic. So I'm going to quick run through the consultant team. I'll actually let each of the leads do it. So I'm Jim Newman, the principal at Linnean. My team is Rebecca Howard. Quick say hi, Rebecca, so you pop up. Great.
Hi.
And Olivia Villa. You want to say hi, Olivia?
Hi.
Fantastic. And I'm going to hand it to Keith.
Hi, everybody. Keith Salzberg-Jesdal. I'm one of the principals with Regenerative Design Group. Our team is doing a lot of the work around the spatial and map analysis for the communities. And Eric Giordano is on my team here. Say hi, Eric.
Yep.
He was muted. And Eric's doing a lot of the technical side of this, and you'll kind of get to see some of what he does later this evening.
I'll say hi. I was muted. Sorry. Good to be here.
Okay, Jillian.
Hi, I'm Jillian Davies.
Jillian Davies. I have to be clear about that.
I know it's so unusual to have two Jillians in the room. I'm Jillian Davies, and I'm an ecologist and wetland scientist and soil scientist with BSC Group, and project manager for this project for the consulting team. And on my team, I have Casey Lee Bastian, who's a landscape architect extraordinaire, and Adrian Lennon, another ecologist, wetland scientist. And so Casey Lee, do you want to say hi so we pop up?
Hello, everyone. Hi, Casey Lee,
And,
BSC Group.
great. And Adrian, you want to say hi so you pop up?
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here tonight.
Yeah, great. And thanks. That's it on our end.
Fantastic. That's there's a lot of folks, and which is awesome. And so again, I'm going to say, you know, a great way to get stuff into the conversation is to use the chat if you can do that. But you can also interrupt us. So we're ready for it. You want to start the slides there, Jillian?
Sure. I'm going to screen share and we'll just get started. Let's see. And Pam did the introductions and Jim did the welcome. And Jim, I think you're covering this one.
Great. Just a quick note, we're going to talk a lot about sort of what some of the technical parts of this topic, but really what we're after is what has been called natural climate solutions. So a couple of things there. Natural, it's really working with natural systems. Climate, working to both reduce carbon emissions and to help make the communities more resilient. And solutions this is really focused on actions to take. And so as we keep talking and as we get involved, I want everybody to be thinking about, well, what actions could we take using natural systems to really help us be more resilient and to reduce carbon? Those are the things we're going to be talking about as we go along. So, you know, part of this is in going about sort of your everyday life. Many of you on this call are directly involved in these issues in one way or another. You know, thinking about water quality or thinking about water temperature or thinking about heat in a community, thinking about flooding, but want to think about how these things might fit into your everyday life and where it would be really great. And so we'll get into a ton more detail. Next slide, please. So that was part of what it is. When you think about natural climate solutions, which I just kind of described, so what comes to mind for you? And like, go ahead and start picturing some things. Like, I know I picture pieces of forest to help cool my neighborhood. And I picture some grass and trees and things like that at the edge of a parking lot to help manage runoff off that parking lot that can be so full of salt that it'll damage whatever the water it's going into. Those are some of the things that I think about. I live in a relatively urban neighborhood. Others on this call live in much more suburban or rural neighborhoods. But so we all have different ways to think about it. And so as you're thinking about it, if you have thoughts about that, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Why don't you hit the next slide? And then the second part of that question is really, in the places that you are in the places you know, what do you care about most? Why do you care about these things? What is it you're thinking about when you're thinking about, oh, it'd be really great to have some shade trees, or as Allison just put into the chat, to have soil rich in organic carbon. And why do you care about those things? What is it that is really important to you? And we're going to have a much longer conversation about this as we make our way through this presentation and into the discussion part. And thank you for putting stuff into the chat. But I want you to hold it in your heads. Like, why do I care about this? I care about making sure that places that are urban and warm on a hot summer day, and we've had a few of them this last year, even though it's hard to remember now, are cool and can be walkable, and people can actually be outside. Those are some of the things I care about. So, can we get to the next slide? So we're going to transition now to some more informational content. Keep those things coming. We're keeping track of them. And we'll help everybody to get up to speed, to sort of begin to understand, all right, what are we really talking about here? Why do we get involved in this project? And then asking the question, so what do you see in these pieces of information? Deb, I totally agree with you. Clean water to swim in. Ooh, boy, does that matter. So I will let transition to the next slide, and Jillian, take it on over.
Terrific. So just to go over a little bit about the purpose of the project, it's to bring together the community members, municipal staff, and a consulting team to help the communities to build capacity to identify effective natural climate and nature-based solutions, and to provide the communities with an assessment and tools to act really quickly as opportunities to implement nature-based solutions come along. So to accomplish this, we're drawing on three main sources of information. Over the past few months, Linnean Solutions has been engaging community members, as you know, as they've probably reached out to you, to identify and understand existing and prior climate resilience projects, your priorities, and some of the ideas you might have for locations for nature-based solutions, and future needs that you may have. Regenerative Design Group and BSC Group have been developing mapping that reveals climate vulnerabilities and strengths and locations, as well as mapping of locations of environmental justice and climate vulnerable communities, natural resources, including soil health status, wetlands, hydrology, land cover types, ecological climate resilience, and potential future development patterns. And so we'll get into those maps a little bit later in the presentation. And so why natural climate solutions? We know that we're in a very critical time period right now between now and 2030, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has told us that we need to reduce our emissions by 2030 to risk irreversible, very damaging climate change. At the same time, the Intergovernmental, this is a mouthful, Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services has documented that we are experiencing a dramatic loss of biodiversity. And these global leaders are telling us that we need to solve climate and biodiversity emergencies together because they're very intertwined. Neither one can be solved alone. And that's one of the main reasons for focusing on natural systems as part of our solution. Massachusetts is, really out front, I think, in terms of all the states in the country on this. And there's the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2008. And there now is the Massachusetts Decarbonization Roadmap, which you can Google that, the website locations there if you're interested, with a target of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions and reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 85% below 1990 levels. So these goals, we can't reach those without two things: natural climate solutions and reduction in all emissions. And to do that, we need to preserve existing ecosystem carbon and increase the removal of carbon from the atmosphere by our natural systems, because they do all that work for us for free, which is really great. And this slide shows you what a difference it can make to have the carbon renewals. If we can get on this trajectory of reduced carbon emissions, this red dot here shows the point at which we'd reach net zero carbon emissions, CO2 emissions, and the blue represents natural systems pulling carbon out of the atmosphere, so we can get to net zero and still have some carbon emissions by society because it can be offset by the natural systems. And then we can go past that point and cool the planet further with continued, if we can reduce our carbon emissions and have continued natural removal. And this slide, don't have to worry about the details here, just to show you that people have quantified the amount of net carbon CO2 reduction that can happen just by changing how we interact with natural systems, especially forests and agriculture, and protecting wetlands. And so next we'll talk about resilience. And for talking about resilience, it'd be great for you to think about, what does resilience look like for your community? And you can put things in the chat. So what do we mean by resilience? There are a ton of definitions, and it's bandied about here and there, but a key component in all of these definitions is the ability to bounce back. Ecological resilience and community resilience are related. Community resilience involves planning for hazard events and climate changes by integrating the concept of resilience proactively and continuously, and incorporates preparedness, prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery in a collaborative process with a variety of stakeholders. Community resilience planning considers infrastructure and ecological and social and societal resources and vulnerabilities. Ecological assets can increase the resilience of societal and infrastructure components. So what is ecological resilience? Well, there's several definitions for this term as well, but they get at the capacity to maintain species diversity and ecological function as the climate changes. And two definitions are up on the screen here. So resilience is fostered by sites that offer many options to species and ecosystems, such as differences in topography, elevation, habitat types, microclimates, and ideally a lack of barriers and lack of fragmentation. And we call that connectedness. How connected are the natural areas? And the reason for that is it gives the species opportunities to move and shift around in response to stresses. This slide shows the difference between three different types of sites when a disturbance or disruption happens. In this case, the example is a hurricane. Resistant sites are so robust that the hurricane may do a little bit of damage, but they self-heal, they get right back on track, and very quickly afterwards, they're functioning at a similar level that they were prior to the disturbance. A resilient site may experience a larger impact than that, but relatively quickly after the disturbance, it gets on a trajectory to a healing trajectory, a restoration trajectory, where it eventually achieves a similar level of function to what it had before. Alternatively, vulnerable sites take a big hit when the disturbance happens, and then they don't have the capacity to bounce back. They get on a downward trajectory and just deteriorate more and more, and they're very vulnerable. And an example of how ecological climate resilience supports community resilience would be wetlands, because they provide many ecosystem services, and that becomes even more important as our climate changes. They provide flood storage, storm damage prevention, They manage stormwater, help prevent erosion, and provide water supply and clean water. And forests similarly provide shading. They help with evapotranspiration. And both of these types of systems create cooling on the landscape, and including cooling breezes, not just the direct shade. And you can see the blue map up in the corner on the slide shows that in our part of the world, of the United States, we are receiving some of the largest increases in very heavy precipitation. So water management is a big issue for us. And also wetlands are really good at protecting biodiversity, creates diversity of habitats. Waterways and wetlands tend to create wildlife corridors on the landscape, allowing species to move, and they tend to have a lot of biodiversity. And now I'll pass it to Keith, who may be muted right now. I guess he's
I
probably...
was indeed. Thank you, Jillian.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. So in the next few slides, we're going to show you some of the mapping that we've been doing and talk a little bit about how it relates to the project and how it might help help you think about and identify what's happening in your community currently and where we might find places to build solutions to climate change and our resilience. So as you look at these slides, just ask yourself, how does what you're seeing match or contrast to the experience that you have as someone that lives, works, and travels through these areas? So Jillian, you can go ahead and advance. So one of the maps themes that has been prepared by BSC Group is the Nature Conservancy's Resilient Lands Assessment. And this summarizes a whole bunch of ecological data about how well any area performs in terms of resilience, and predicts some of what some challenges you might be facing and where conventional or traditional conservation and restoration projects might connect fragmented landscapes and build resilience over time. Go ahead and advance, Jillian.
Okay.
So in that previous map, we were seeing Hudson, Framingham, and Natick. And the Nature Conservancy has made this wonderful tool which you can explore yourself. And it looks at these four main concepts. You know, what's the geophysical setting and the geodiversity, like how geographically and topographically diverse is this site, and that connects to the complexity of the landscape. How much ecological integrity is there? You know, species diversity, habitat continuity, and the biological function and condition of the place. And again, how connected are these landscapes to themselves and externally? Go ahead, Jillian. So when we think about the site from a resilience standpoint to climate change, we can't just think about what's happening within the town borders, because as Allison said, air and water don't really follow municipal boundaries. And that's also true for, I think, all life forces and many other forces. So we will zoom in and out and look at the communities in their larger context of their watersheds and the other municipalities that surround them, and at a finer detail within these communities. Go ahead, Jillian. And you know, I just want to note at this point that mapping and spatial analysis is just one way to find places where nature-based solutions can help build climate resilience in any place. We'll be working to make sure that the three main ways of identifying sites and areas for action synchronize and talk to one another. So, you know, we'll be looking at the known issues, opportunities, and projects that the towns and all the work you've done up to this point have already identified. in provided to us as areas or points or projects. Linnean's been hard at work talking to lots of people within your communities, and will continue that work and really trying to identify what locations and issues might be affecting people who are not typically part of planning processes and who might be really affected by the work that we do or don't do over time. And then again, the mapping and analysis is one piece, and together, these will come together to help identify the site walks and other places that we'll explore, and ultimately identify the priority areas and project sites for the work we'll be doing with nature-based solutions. And the climate resiliency mapping that we just looked at is one of the many analyses that will be part of that mapping and spatial analysis component, and that we'll be working on and refining over the course of this project. And this mapping is intended to identify the areas and actions and forces that are important to climate resilience that might not be raised through other planning efforts or community members who know about a site. So Jillian, go ahead and advance, please. And it also is a way to identify, to see how the sites that are identified through people who know the community fit into the broader social, economic, and ecological patterns that exist within your community. The points that we see here, the stars, are locations that were identified by Linnean's work, overlaid on top of the environmental justice mapping that's available as a state layer. And it's just interesting to note that a whole bunch of these points are found within or right adjacent to some of the environmental justice communities, but quite a lot of them are found outside of that. And so what does that mean? How do we prioritize the action? And we'll be running through that kind of adjacency and overlap for all kinds of different themes. Jillian, please. So this map shows a breakdown of the land cover in your 3 towns. And land cover is an interesting predictor of, a land cover being whether the site is forested or paved or in grass. It predicts how the site might function ecologically and how it might affect the people and species that live in that area. And it also suggests what nature-based solutions might help build ecological integrity and climate resilience. But you can see here, it can be complex and highly fragmented and hard to see patterns. So some of the work we'll be doing will be looking for how they shape the areas and how there might be dominance within one place or another. Jillian? Jillian, go ahead, please.
Do you see that? It's showing me that it says impervious surface percent of subbasin.
Yes, great. Thank you.
that
Sorry,
showing?
there's just a lag on my
Okay.
end, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, so when we think about the land cover types that have an outsized impact on the function of ecology in a place, impervious surface is one of them, and there's a whole lot of impervious surface that exist in these areas. And we've tried to classify the specific subbasins of the watersheds to sort of identify, okay, what watersheds do we really need to protect protect from development, and where are there thresholds that are being crossed that are going to impact the health of the hydrology, and where are there places that are already highly impacted where we might take strong interventions and do creative things with nature-based solutions to improve the function and replace the function that's been lost. Go ahead, Jillian.
Did it pop up?
It did, thank you. So one of the things that we've been working on for the last pile of years is assessing soil health across the state of Massachusetts. And we found that soil organic carbon is a strong proxy or a strong stand-in for measuring soil health and predicting soil health. So like land cover, the specific patterns that you see can be really complex here. So one of some of the work that we've done over the last weeks for your communities is to try to create an understanding of how this soil function, soil carbon being one of the key soil functions, affects both the current performance and future direction for soils and soil management and the kind of interventions that we might take. Go ahead and advance, Jillian. So you can see this in this map that we've created called Soil Functions for Resilience. And the dark green patches represent soils that are already high performing, have high soil organic carbon, and are doing a lot of work in your communities. These are places that we would want to make sure we protect and think carefully of when development happens or any change of land cover happens. The sort of aqua color soils are kind of average. They're not particular standouts, but they are in green cover right now. And these are places where better management, implementing best practices, would have a strong impact on the overall health of the soil and help them perform better. The orange color is a high regeneration potential. That means if you were to implement best practices or more strong intervention, these are places that could become high performance soils and really help replace some of the lost function on a watershed scale that exists within these red areas, places that have been highly impacted already. And the action there would be intensive replication of lost soil function or mitigation for that lost soil function, like water absorption. So that's the kind of patterning we'll be looking for in these communities. And then go ahead, another slide, Julian. And trying to think about, okay, so we have these points that have been identified, and how do they talk to the different characteristics that exist within the landscape and social and economic community patterns. So as we develop these maps, we will be uploading them to the map data viewer, which is being hosted by BSC Group, and Adrian's been the architect of, so that you can go on and explore any of this data that you'd like to see and tell whatever stories with it make sense. So I'll pass it to you, Adrian.
You're muted, Adrian.
Thank you. I'm excited to do the flyover for everyone and show you a little bit of your communities based on how we're conducting the desktop view. What you're looking at right now is the landing page of the website for this project. And there's a tab here called the Data Viewer tab. It lands on a splash page for it where we're acknowledging the funding source and also the municipalities involved, and also identifying the data sources for the layers that we're showing you. So we already talked a little bit about the Nature Conservancy Resilient Land Mapping tool. There's also the UMass Index for ecological integrity and the New England Landscape Futures layers, in addition to many mass GIS data layers. So you can click on these links and actually see those resources themselves. A couple of them are GIS resources that you can toy around in. I think the New England Landscape Futures conversation about how to think about land is a really useful thought exercise before kind of entering into this process for Framingham, Natick, and Hudson. So the data viewer opens up and the first layer that comes up on it is typically the Natural Heritage Endangered Species layer. And you can see up here in the corner, you can pull down the layers. I like to put them over here in this corner here. and you can turn them on and off. So right now, rare and endangered species is on. So we're looking at certified vernal pools, potential vernal pools, and NHESP priority habitats, and I'll just turn that off. And I want to just orient you a little bit to how to use this particular tool. You can zoom in quite a bit on these couple of communities. We can get down very, very close. Ooh, and we're way out of town here. Before you start really turning layers on. Oh, there you are. Okay. So I set up a couple just so we could take a look at them, and I could share, you know, how I typically look at these things. Looking at Hudson here, I turned on the urban heat islands layer. I like to try to do 2 layers at a time and at around 1/3 of a mile of the view shed. And then I also turned on this development pressure layer, which is produced by New England Landscape Features. And you can see here, this is a view of existing urban heat islands. And as you increase the opacity of the landscape features risk for potential development pressure, you can see some of these areas are under tremendous pressure for additional development, which would really exacerbate the urban heat island issue. And where am I? In Framingham, I pulled up the FEMA floodplain data set, and right now we're just looking at the 100-year floodplain. And we're also looking at wetlands and water bodies, major hydrogeography. So we're looking at the resource areas that are existing, and then we're also looking at their floodplain buffer zones and compensatory flood storage areas. And you can also go up to the 500-year floodplain, and you can see some additional spaces and locations where you may see, you know, in a major storm event, more aerial and surface water flooding, if that's something that's interesting to you. And then the last one that I produced here, this is Natick. And this one I think is kind of fun to look at because it's the biomap 3 local level components. I have the opacity up pretty high, and I want to introduce you to the legend button in that because there are so many features of the biomap 3 components. They can't actually put them on this side. They have to have their own kind of layer to it, so we can see a lot of different resource area types and their buffer zones that provide services to your natural landscape. And then the final piece here is data tables and export tools. So you can actually get the original GIS data as it was provided to us and incorporated. This here is Natural Heritage Endangered Species Priority Habitats there in the red and orange dots on this particular slide. And then finally, there's a share button. So you can just copy the link and drop it into a chat, and everybody can open it up themselves and take a look. I'll share the other 2 as well, and you have something to play with and an easy way to access it. And just remember, usually 2 or 3 layers is sort of the maximum tolerance for being able to glean important information from that desktop survey work before you go out into the land to take a look at what's actually out there. All right, and now I'm going to give it back.
All right, pretty exciting. One of the great things about this is that it allows anybody with a computer and an internet connection to go ahead and play around with this stuff. It's pretty fantastic. It's a lot to learn and to dig in and push stuff around.
Can you unshare, Adrian?
There we go.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
So you can come back to the slides. While we're switching back to slides, anybody have thoughts or questions you want to share with us or with everybody right now?
Yeah.
Awesome. We'll have plenty of time. We got lots of good questions.
Keith, I think you've covered everything in your mapping talk already. Okay, so I'll
I
go
did,
back
yeah,
to,
thank you.
okay. I'll go back to the slides now. And let's see. So, okay, Keith, I think you're up on this slide.
Yeah, so just in sum, we're going to be working to identify the most powerful and effective nature-based solutions for climate resiliency, and especially thinking about those that are climate vulnerable. So in addition to the things we talked about, we'll be looking at other social and ecological vulnerabilities and pressures. So what's going to change over time? Where is development likely to happen? What's the current and potential ecological climate resilience, and how do healthy soils, water, wetlands, forests, and trees build into that? And this is a question for you. What other themes, what other aspects and features should we be looking at to help identify where nature-based solutions are going to be most significant for you in your communities? So you're welcome to reach out to us directly or through your town representatives. So I'll hand it back to you, Jillian.
Okay, thanks. So next we're going to take a look at some different types of natural climate solutions or nature-based solutions. And for these, feel free to consider where in your community can you see natural climate solutions being beneficial. And we're going to go pretty quickly through. The idea is just to give you kind of a menu of choices. And as our discussion evolves, we can go into some of these in a little more detail. The term nature-based solutions refers to actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits. And that's from the International Union of the Conservation of Nature. You'll see other definitions other places. Here's a list of typical nature-based solutions, and we'll see some of examples in a minute. You'll also hear the term green infrastructure, which is a definition for that is a strategically planned network of natural and semi-natural areas with other environmental features designed and managed to deliver a wide range of ecosystem services in both rural and urban settings. Green infrastructure includes natural systems as well as practices that are engineered to mimic natural systems. And there's a little list of potential engineered solutions right there, or green infrastructure solutions. So open space acquisition is one type of a nature-based solution. Open space protection, you might have some farmland or other open space that you want to protect, and buffer zone and floodplain restoration, that offers a ton of benefits in terms of storing floodwaters and stormwater and improving water quality, as well as offering recreational and educational opportunities. Restoration of water bodies, such as daylighting streams. This stream that you see here used to be in a culvert, and now it's a functioning ecosystem with all the water quality and flood mitigation and community revitalization benefits. Nature-based solutions are not new, although the term is new. Back in 1974, Congress authorized the purchase and permanent protection of 17 scattered wetlands in the middle and upper parts of the Charles River watershed, right here in eastern Massachusetts. And that cost a little over $8 million, and they got a little over 8,000 acres, as opposed to having to spend $30 million on a constructed flood control structure. And it then went on to prevent millions of dollars of flood damages. And then in addition to preventing the flood damages, the wetlands provided other ecosystem services, so that multiplied the value that came out of that project. Another approach, another nature-based solution is actually to add climate smart provisions to your bylaws and regulations, zoning, open space, stormwater, wetlands, the full suite of municipal bylaws and regulations. And of course, outreach and education to have a broader part of your population understand these benefits and learn from them and enjoy the process of learning. And now, Casey Lee, you can take these next few slides.
Yeah, so bringing our stormwater into natural systems and processing them and making sure that the things we put into them support habitat is an important piece for us with all those fringe benefits. Give me the next slide. In dam removals or things that take care of obstructions, historically, we've cut off a lot of species' ability to move, and by doing so, sort of adapt to where climate works best for them. So changing some of the obstructions that have been done by previous generations. And next. Then working things into our built environment, getting habitat and nature to come home to us. There's only so much putting nature somewhere else. It's time to start having this at home and making sure that we get our groundwater into the ground in places that we still use. Next. And then of course, our urban forest. Having your street trees connect to stands and masses of native vegetation. We've got enough data now to sort of see where the thresholds are, where we start to stabilize our bee and bird populations and what the things we need to do to correct those are. So working on our street trees and urban forests. Next. And then looking at not just the wetland and the upland, but those in-between places and trying to spread water out. If we want to sequester carbon and grow lots of vegetation for species, water is essential, and getting it spread out into the landscape is a key task. Next. Then looking at our buildings and our structures and our food systems, how we're getting our energy and how we're using our space. There are a lot of the verticals and the horizontals that are neglected or abused, things that we aren't using properly or to use their best effect. These are some of the ways that we can change that. Next. Making sure that we are capturing and using everything on site and that we aren't paving things that don't need to be paved anymore. It used to be that that was the clean and easy thing to do, and we didn't want nature close to us. Labor was cheap, materials were cheap. None of those things are true anymore, and they really weren't true in the first place. It's time to flip that. Next. More of the same, looking at the low impact options. And yes, these will be available. Next. The other part of that is taking all of these different types of solutions and tying them together in systems that work for us and with us, space that we can use and that support natural function and human function. We want to have a beautiful, safe, calming, human environment. Next. And this, I think I can pass it back.
Yeah, passing it back to Jim.
All right. All right. That is fantastic. Thank you, Casey. Hey, so one of the things that you one of the things you see is that there's a lot of different kinds of things that we might consider and that might be valuable in different settings. And there are lots of different ways to think about what to do and where to put things. So I will, so Deb asked to define nature-based solutions a little bit further. The whole idea of nature-based solutions is that there are a lot of situations that we've kind of built when we've built our towns and cities that are creating trouble and have created trouble. They make places hotter than they need to be. They make water dirtier as it goes into the river than it should be. Or into a lake. So these kinds of things, we're looking for ways that use natural systems like trees and plants and grass and mounds of earth and changes in soil to deal with, to kind of fix those problems and to make things better and different and better. And that's sort of what nature-based solutions are.
Do you have an example of one?
Yeah, we've just given you a bunch of examples
Can I
here.
have another one? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll give you another one. There's another project that a couple of us are working on that is in a sort of urban setting where we're identifying places to plant little sets of very intensive trees to help manage air quality out of some of the diesel trains that go by the area. And so it's a natural thing. It's a bunch of trees. They're pretty dense. We pick very specific places to put them based on what people want and who live around that area. And it's not a big wall, right? So a sort of hard or gray solution would be a big wall. Bunch of trees, that's a more natural solution. So thanks, I'm glad I could answer that. And I think probably there's a lot of people who have that question.
Thank you. Okay, got it.
So no problem. It's a pleasure. So one of the things we've talked to a lot of folks. A lot of the reasons people are here tonight is because myself and Rebecca Howard and a couple of other folks have been out talking to people to find out what's important, what places you're thinking of. Like, okay, what places are you in? It's like, wow, this is really a problem. Kind of like what Deb put into the chat way at the beginning about, oh man, there are places where I'd really like to be able to swim to cool off. And it's like, but sometimes in the middle of the summer we can't swim there. And so we've been talking to a lot of people. We use what is referred to as a snowball approach. The idea is that you start a little bit with a few people and then you ask them and the group of people gets bigger and you ask them and the group of people gets bigger. And out of that, we've talked to 35, 40 people representing the state, representing the MBTA, representing different community and nonprofit organizations, representing specific community members, representing tribal members. And but we want to keep going. And so we're going to ask you as we go along to give us some more folks. Who else should we be talking to and bringing into this conversation? Who's missing? What voices do we really need to have or have more of and have a stronger presence? And so I really hope that you can all help with that as well. Next slide. So in that process, we identified a whole collection of locations that are all the little stars in the three communities that could use some help. And some of those locations are like Lake Boone. We talked to folks from Lake Boone and came up with a couple of spots around the lake. It's like, ooh, some interventions here that caught water on the way out of certain kinds of settings would really help water quality in the lake. It's like, ooh, that would be, yes, the answer is yes, Deb, you should be inviting other people to join us. And probably the easiest way to do this is to have them contact myself or Rebecca Howard or Olivia Vila. We'll put our emails in the chat so you can do that. And our phone number, my phone number. So other places like that were So we have a whole list of them. And you can sort of see where how they're distributed around the communities. And you can see that in sort of the downtown parts of Natick and South Framingham are some of the concentrations. It's like, okay, here's some things that we could do here that would be really great. Some of them are also not in those areas. Some of them are in much more suburban or slightly rural areas, but might still, like for example, some of the ones along the Assabet River or along the Charles River will have effects for towns downstream, which is kind of what the Pleasant Valley was. The Pleasant Valley project that Jillian was talking about was doing. It was like way upstream, but has these big effects downstream. So we want to be thinking about all of that. You know, you have an opportunity to be helping people downstream from you. What a great opportunity. Next slide. So we're going to jump into a conversation now. Where I'm going to ask you why what should we be caring about in picking locations at the next meeting, which will be in about 3 weeks, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. We'll have it all. There'll be another slide that has all the meeting dates. We're going to start actually taking those reasons, those whys, and saying, okay, now let's look at each spot. And then after that, we're going to go look at them. We'll do a walking tour. You get a chance to show us around. And yes, Andrea, I'd love to get Kristen Wyman involved. And so we'll have a chance to actually look at places and talk about them. You can share why you think they're important, and we'll get a chance to really dig into what might work there. So it's a great opportunity to get members of communities where we're looking at spots to come out and talk and listen and give us, sort of let's make some choices here and make some important, figure out what's important. So before we get to that, which happens, off in the next couple of meetings, let's jump into the question of what's important. So I think we could probably kill the slides and then we can come back to the last couple.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, so I'm going to stop the share.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll ask the question, what's important? Why do we care about things? And a lot of this has already come up in the chat. You can state it again, but I'll start with some of the things that are important to me. Hopefully then people can, it's just, Deb, as Hillary says, she was on your presentation, and we have got the presentation, have been looking at it very carefully. So some of the things that are important to me are, it's important to restore waterways. I feel it's really important to restore waterways because waterways are like the sort of blood of our land, and it's clean water has a huge effect. We can swim, we can fish, we can do all these things, and it feeds the rest of the landscape. So for me, clean water is really important. And so things we can do to clean water are really important. So what about you? What things are really important to you? And I know there are a number of you who are ready to answer this question because you've been working on something specific for a while. So you can unmute yourself and talk. Biodiversity. Christopher, would you like to say something about biodiversity and why that's important?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, for me, water is, as it is for you, very important. I think that when we talk in terms of resilience, having that biodiversity and clean water allows us, I mean, that is the bulwark against cataclysmic events. You know, I mean, you can't have a sustainable, I mean, the coastline come to mind definitely for me, and I know that's not a Natick issue, but the rivers can fall into that as well. But you have, you know, sea level rise, you have large storm events that hit the coastline, and if you don't have those natural barriers, you don't bounce back. You become that vulnerable. So I think, you know, as part of the Conservation Commission here in Natick, I think I've seen far too often a point where, you know, we have to make decisions for developers to try to mitigate some of the more economic driven scenarios where they want to just clear cut something, or they want to take out stuff and put in ornamental trees or things like that. And I like the idea of really focusing on the biodiversity, but I think having that with an environmental justice component is key.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So Deb, you were talking about the survey of work that you did on this topic. I'd love to, if you have things that out of that survey that represents a whole bunch of people's perspectives that might speak to this about what's important to people and to you in terms of, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a link in the chat, I believe Jillian put it in, that you can click on library, metro, West climate equity. But yeah, so we did talk about some of the things I talked about, clean water. I live over here in Natick near the rail trail, Constituent Rail Trail.
Yep.
And right near the lake. And sometimes the lake was not swimmable in the summer. And I believe it was the quality of the water or some bacteria. I really didn't understand why it was it. I don't know, maybe someone else that lives in Natick can speak to that. Why the river, the water, the lake wasn't swimmable. But
exactly. If anybody wants to talk to that, we also know, great, thank you, Paul. That there's a couple of things that really have an effect. One of them is runoff from the sort of parking lots in the area and streets, and the other is that and it generates cyanobacteria. And there's also some bacteria that gets in from septic systems and things like that. And so those are some things that, you know, we can potentially work to help in certain ways. Other things it's going to be hard to do anything about. But knowing that we care about that is really what is really important. Allison Field Juma or Andre, you have things you want to jump into? I know you both have a lot to say on these topics.
I'm enjoying listening because I think people are hitting the nail on the head. And it's just so many cases, and it's great conversation, and the chat's lively, and I think it's great.
I do have a lot to share. I don't want to take a lot of time, but also travel protocol. You know, like my family as a Nipmuc, my family is more central Worcester and into Springfield territory. So I do move throughout all of our territory doing this work, but it's important when we're speaking of particular areas, especially like Natick. That's why I spoke that Kristen Wyman and the Natick community should be present in this conversation, because for me to speak over them is not the right thing to do, especially because we're a matriarch society. So, you know, those women should be speaking for their territory, not me. So there is much that I should share and can share, and I will share in the future. And as long as we continue to invite, you know, the Natick community to this conversation, I'll be more than happy to share. It's just travel protocol, and it's important to hold our traditional values.
Great, thank you, Andre. And I will get back to you pretty quick about getting a hold of Kristen and others. So my hands, sure, Claire.
Andre, I just wanted to touch on your point quickly, since you brought it up outside of the chat as well. We did try to reach out to Kristen. We know she's very busy with quite a number of things, but we'll do a second reach out to her and Marcus as well to re-invite them back into this conversation.
Yeah. And we also appreciate that everybody has many things going on, and it's not necessarily, you know, the most important to participate in any particular one thing. And we respect that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that, Claire. It gives me a little bit more clarity. No pun intended.
I like that.
I just want to say to
yeah, go ahead.
everybody that the this has been recorded, and a big reason to do that is if there are people who want to participate but they couldn't make it tonight, they can watch this recording, and we'll post it on the project website, and that way they can not feel they can get up to speed if they want to join in later.
Exactly. Sage, anything you want to join? I hate to call people out, but you know, it works so darn well. And why don't you introduce yourself, and then
yeah, of course. Hi there. My name is Sage Wen. I am a student at Natick High School. So I was brought into this project by the sustainability director, Jillian Wilson Martin at Natick. And this is a really great opportunity for me, but I am really interested in learning specifically about what solutions are going to be implemented. And I've been working specifically with students and the youth community at Natick High School to kind of continue to take data the way that we've been taking it for the greater community. And a lot of students have things to say, and there are a lot of students that also don't have many things to say. And that is, yeah, that the Earth Club is really, really invested in developing and implementing solutions like these in Natick, but it's also important to consider like how much education we really need to be doing. And I'm just so inspired by all the information that's been going around, but I can definitely see what a challenge this is going to be to convey the importance and influence of all of this to the upcoming generation who's really going to be most impacted by it. But yeah, I mean, that's all I really have to say right now.
fantastic. Thank you, Sage, and it's a pleasure to have you as part of this group. And we invite others to join us. Other folks, what's important to you? So Sage was just talking about, well, the opportunity for education is pretty important. That seems like a big item. What other kinds of things are important to you? Why would we bother doing some of these kinds of projects?
I'll jump in. This is Jillian, Sustainability Director for Natick. When we look at that resilient lands map or the nature conservancy tool, I just find it a little scary that a lot of the places in Natick that are like conservation land or open space and maybe public or privately owned, that they aren't very resilient according to that data. And so wanting to really protect those places and improve their ability to perform those really valuable ecosystem services that we talked about, that, you know, there's so much that's developed, and that those areas are maybe harder to work in because you're dealing with, you know, gray infrastructure stuff that's like physical buildings that are there. But it seems like maybe we could do better at maximizing the value of those places that we've already taken the time to preserve, at least from development. So I'm hopeful about that.
So that's a great sort of, there's a great value expressed there, which is we've already done some work to preserve some areas. One of the values might be to make the most of the things that we have. I think that's important. I also think, and I'd love to hear other people about this, I also think that it's probably pretty important to try and do whatever is possible in places that are more urbanized, you know, that are more paved, and to find little things to do that will actually bring some of that ecosystem activity back into those places. Other folks who haven't said anything. I'm gonna start calling people. Ha ha.
I could speak up. So I don't know, just from my exposure as I'm like getting more familiar with Framingham as a city, something that I've learned about is there's like a serious flooding problem. And I mean, in terms of things that are important, it's important to me. I'm not getting flooded personally, but it's hard to imagine having to worry about your house getting flooded on a regular basis from an ecosystem that's not performing the way it should due to overdevelopment or other issues that I think could definitely be addressed by nature-based solutions. So that's something that's a big deal for me. And like, it's just hard to imagine the discomfort and that just weighing on you, like the fact that your house at any time could be, or is over time gradually being destroyed or getting, you know, flooding in general. Thanks.
That's great. So how would you characterize that as a value?
I guess like, something to do with like housing essentially, or like having a place to like residence, I guess. I don't know how you'd put it, but yeah, like security in your housing, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, safety and security are an important value. Great, perfect. Brooke, yeah.
Yeah, I would second that as well. A lot of downtown Hudson has a lot of areas where there were mills kind of built alongside the waterways. And so water's kind of channeled in an unnatural way, which I've seen neighbors have flooding issues and things like that. Along that riverway in the downtown, there's a lot of multifamily housing that I'll see like a hose coming out of the basement because it's so flooded. So I think having some kind of adaptability with aquatic connectivity, as well as maybe looking at those really those historically industrial areas that might channel the water in a way that's unnatural, it could be a good spot to take a look at.
Fantastic. Yeah, go ahead, Christopher.
Yeah, I think one of the things that popped up when I was looking at those maps is just what I know of Natick and what I know of the parts of Framingham is that, you know, the socioeconomic component is just jumps right out. You have areas where you have a higher economic status where they have a more resilient looking area. I mean, you've got lower density, you've got more land cover. And I think that's the conundrum with so environmental justice, is that you have to understand that a lot of the lower income people with economically difficult situations in their lives are often near areas where there's a lot of less permeable surfaces, more commercial areas. I think we don't have enough zoning that covers that level of, sorry, my dog,
Bugs.
You know, that those things tend to go together, and they don't, you know, we don't look at how we can have commercial places have green roofs, or you know, special permeable parking lots, and areas where they can recharge the water that comes off of the impermeable surfaces. So I'd like to see a strong focus on that.
That sounds great. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think that's it. Thank you.
I was going to say, so, you know, what there's probably a value in there. It's just like about having to work harder to really do things in places that need it more.
Right, correct. Yeah, correct.
Sean, and then Sarky. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to build on Chris's and also Dom's comments. I think particularly when we look at our downtown, in addition to flooding concerns, when you have more impermeable surface, another major concern we have is heat islands. And you look at the heat island mapping, and you can kind of see those hot spots. And I mean, a large part of South Framingham is a hot spot, and just figuring out how we can better integrate nature-based solutions, whether it's green roofs, figuring out how we can work with business owners, a lot of these larger properties to better integrate some of these solutions. I think it's going to be critical as the weather gets hotter, and people are starting to realize that with recent summers, and it's only going to get worse. And the other thing related to that too is I feel like a lot of these solutions are connected in a way we don't initially kind of think about. We're doing a lot of outreach on energy efficiency, and if you're tying in nature-based solutions, they can be a really critical part of an overall solution. I think you guys did a great job of outlining that at the beginning of the presentation. So, yeah.
It's so true. Yes. Everything is connected, and as you say, already interacting with people about different things, and we really are working in sort of one place, and it's like all the things we do in that one place kind of touch each other. Sarky, you want to jump in?
Yes. First, thanks the consulting team. This has been a great discussion tonight. Good to see the number of Natick folks on this call. I think the city of Framingham's got to do a better job of getting people to come to these meetings. But
if there's one thing we like, it's a little friendly competition.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm a Natick guy, so you got to remember that. Natick guy that works in the city of Framingham. So, but we talk about sustainability, and typically it's associated with environmental, right? It has environmental attributes, but I think we got to look at sustainability about everything. Everything matters, whether it's housing, partnerships, property, health, operations, wellness. And that's got to be our mindset. I mean, you look at the pressures that we have where they're telling us to put housing, right? And of course, they want to see the housing around the transportation modes or in downtowns. And you heard tonight that, we have flooding in our downtown. We have areas before we had the Wetland Protection Act that basically we filled in the floodplain, right? I mean, we didn't have the Wetland Protection Act to the 70s. And so now we're faced with those issues and those problems. You heard about it tonight about, I think Don brought up the flooding that we're having downstream with Beaver Dam Brook. Beaver Dam Brook basically starts in Framingham, works its way right through the center, right through the floodplain, and eventually into Natick, and then eventually into Lake Atituate. Lake Atituate is that what I heard tonight from Deb is where she liked to swim. Well, guess what? All that water that migrates from Framingham eventually gets into that lake. So we all have to look at this. Everything has to involve, whether we talk about housing, we were talking exactly the big picture, right? We have 8 billion people on the planet today? 8 billion. The planet grew in 10 years, 1 billion people in 10 years. So and then faced with all the housing issues that we have, I mean, that's like the number one priority. You open up a newspaper every single day, people can't afford to live here. And so all these competing interests and, the nature-based solutions, and I'm happy to report that, we're moving forward with 103 Guild Street. It's a purchase of land. It's about 30 acres of land, 11 acres in Framingham. I think there's 20-something acre, 10 acres in Framingham, 20 acres in Ashland, and I think an acre in Sherburne. But we're going to look at purchasing that land, not only for conservation, but for floodplain storage. And we're hoping that this MVP, these climate proposals, and this listening and discussion, that we can have that discussion about that project, which will help us protect that land, and leave the land in its natural state and have it. I mean, like Dom said tonight, it shouldn't be, it's not fair that families have to, worry when there's a huge rain event and they're so worried that their basements are going to get flooded out, or, they're going to have major issues. So again, I think this discussion, Tanya, is great, and we need to continue to have these discussions, but it needs to involve everything. When you talk about housing, not only housing, but where can people, where can they go grocery shopping without having to get in the car, having all those components together. But thank you, and this has been a good listening discussion tonight.
Well, thanks, Sergis. That's a great reminder to think of, to not say, okay, well, we're only talking about these little things. It's like, no, we're talking about a lot of things, and how can we affect a lot of things together in different ways. Pam?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I was thinking about what Sarki was saying about all the development, and this is something that drives me crazy in Hudson. I know it's happening in Framingham too, because I live there. I assume it's happening in Natick, is that because it's so built out, now people want to develop the worst places that they shouldn't develop. So the only places left that have a lot of trees, now they're clear cutting all the trees to be able to develop the few areas left in town that aren't developed. And of course, that's going to impact all the climate change issues. If you start removing all the trees and vegetation, then you have the problems with more heat areas, more flooding areas, and all those things. So, I mean, one thing I would like to see is finding ways, to revegetate any, places that we can as part of the nature-based solutions, because I just feel like we're losing all our remaining vegetation.
That's a great thought. The whole idea of like, well, one goal can be sort of what's called afforestation, which is adding forests, and wherever that is, big, small. Sorry, I get distracted there for a moment. There are, I realize this is always a trick, but there are some models for how to think about sort of development regulation. Ooh, thank you, Deb, for being here. Development regulation to help some of that. And in a lot of ways, the mapping that Keith and Regenerative Design Group have done can be useful in that department. And we can share some stuff that might be interesting to you. That sort of falls under the category of nature-based solutions. It's more like enabling nature-based solutions, I think, really. But that counts. Other thoughts? People ready to jump in and tell us what you think? All right, everybody's being very quiet. All right.
Yeah, I was gonna type in a comment, but I might as well speak it. I wanted to thank you for sharing that last comment about the way that river flows through and it affects so many people. This is the way that our people have always thought in these ways. And like I said, I don't want to speak so much over a particular land parcel, because I believe that it should be Kristen and the Natick community, those matriarchs speaking for this territory. But I do want to give you a particular mindset that we do have when it comes to thinking about everything that we're speaking about here. And one of the things is there's still you know, we stewarded the land here for 10, 12,000 years. We understand that the Creator gave us this thought process to be able to be that. That was our job. That was what we were supposed to do here. These traditional teachings have been passed down for 10, 12,000 years, and we still hold a lot of this in our heart and in our blood. And so there's a lot of ways that we connect with land in a particular reciprocity that speaks to us in a way that a lot of folks can't really digest. With that being said, I definitely am always happy to listen to scientists, in particular people who have dedicated their lives to doing this work, trying to bring the balance back into balance. When really it's only been a couple hundred years that we got off balance, you know, but we got a tree right on our reservation that's just a couple hundred years old, and it's still alive to this day. So we know that it actually wasn't that long ago that the balance became unbalanced. And so, yeah, I've worked on a few projects with, you know, I see some familiar faces here, and I'm happy to continue to see people still fighting this fight for the land and for the earth, the Hockey Cod Nipi Maquantamunk, you know, that earth and water memory. You know, when we speak this language, we understand that earth and the land and air and all these elements, they understand our language in a way that just like your family understands who you are. You know, that's a relation, you know, and when we say and we speak about all these things, we understand that these are our relations, just like a family, you know, you get close to your family. And so one thing that came up was housing, and it's, you know, we're talking about, you know, 8 billion people on the earth now and how it's multiplying like crazy. And absolutely, you know, that's a interesting thought process to expand your mind around. But I want to talk about the Nipmucs who are still here in our traditional homelands and who cannot even afford to live in our traditional homelands. And when we talk about Grafton, Hassanamisset, it's only 4.5 acres. And so at one time that was 7,000 acres, and due to forceful assimilation and through deeds, these deeds that were through debt have been put us into a particular way of having to be here. And understand that, like, if you push out the people who have stewarded the lands for 10, 12,000 years here, and we're not able to be at these meetings to have these forestry management plans, or have become so assimilated because we're in these cities and like Worcester or Springfield or Boston, and aren't able to connect with the land like I told you that we do, in the ways that we do, with this language that we do, then how can we steward the land? How can we help? How can we be there? And so I just wanted to bring attention to, you know, I spent a lot of time with the Natick community folks, and you know, we just burnt out a machoon in Sudbury. And, you know, that was the first machoon that had been burnt out. A machoon is a canoe, a traditional canoe. We fall a tree and we burn it out. And, you know, so cultural revitalization and preservation is at the utmost forefront for me in my walk. You know, as a carpenter, I walked away from that life and just dedicated my life to my cultural practices and teaching it to our tribe and our sister tribes. And so our nonprofit is No Loose Braids, and we've been continuously fighting for creating balance and creating awareness with public education as well as tribal education. But, you know, I don't want to get too far into what I do. Like with that, I wanted to speak about the Nipmuc people, the Natick people who can't afford to live in there. And so if we're talking about bringing balance into this particular parcel of land, we really need to bring indigenous views into this as well. And I'm grateful, like I said, and thankful that I'm here listening to all those who really care and have a lot of knowledge about what's happening here on Ahi, the earth, you know. And so thank you also for all the work that you do. You know, I just wanted to share that much.
Thanks, Andre. You are right, and there are many people here who really care and are working hard, like yourself, to try and restore balance. And your thoughts, yeah, go ahead, Allison.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say that what he's saying makes so much sense. And Christopher Stillman had posted in the chat about how Kristen was integral to restoring our Natick portion of the Charles on the Dam Commission. And I remember, and sitting in on those meetings, it was so clear to me that people, I don't know the people well, but it seemed that people really respected her voice in saying, and we're at ORS, we're working on dam removal, and that thing of restoring natural functions to the way they were a long time ago, or not so long ago, as I pointed out, 200 years isn't in a sense that long ago, but it struck a chord. I think I would just say that maybe hasn't been struck in a while, and it just made me really happy to see that we, genuine voices can really appeal to people's imaginations and their conscience, and saying, oh, right, that is the right thing to do. That's all. Just restoring the natural flow of a river. Yeah, that is the right thing to do. And it makes sense now, particularly.
Thanks, Allison. Anyone else want to jump in on this?
I just want to thank Andre for sharing that, and Allison, and I'm hopeful that Kristen can join these conversations and we can learn from her wisdom, which, as others have shared in the chat and Allison did, it was really meaningful to us in Natick. And so we're so grateful to the Nipmuc community for sharing your time with us, because we know how valuable that is and how there's so many demands on it right now. So I just want to say that we also don't expect you to share your time. So we appreciate that you're so giving with it. So thank you.
True. Fantastic. Okay. Jillian, let's take it home.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to share screen again. And here we go. Jim, I think you had a few closing remarks you were gonna.
I do. Just so just what we're trying to do, and thank you to everybody who has made comments, both out loud and in the chat. All of those are here for all of us to use. It's while there's a lot of talking on our end, it's like, okay, there's this and there's that and there's this and here's what these things are. The real value in these conversations is in the conversation, and we all get to learn. And now we take all this learning and we take it to the next time we get together, and we get to use it to do even more. So I think we can go on to the next slide, which has some of that information.
Great. So I just wanted to throw up these website links where you can check out the maps in more detail and the other aspects to the website. The data viewers on there with the maps, and then there's also a link up here to the Nature Conservancy Resilient Land Mapping Tool if you want to check that out. And during the second core team, we'll review these in greater detail. And also the website is only partially built now. It's going to get built out even more as the project progresses. And here's our general schedule for the project. We're at the core team meeting #1 today, January 25th. And then on February 13th, Monday, February 13th, we'll have our second core team meeting, which I hope that you all will be able to make it to. That's going to be a little bit different structure, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. We also have a component of this project that's some drone surveys that once at core team meeting 2, we will be selecting the actual locations where we're going to do some site walks in the spring when the weather's better. And the drone surveys will survey those areas before the leaves come out and after the leaves come out, which will be really cool. In April, we're going to do 1 day of site walks in each of the communities. So you don't have to go to all 3, but hopefully you will come to the site walk in your community. And then we will take the information that we gather there, that we've been gathering, the mapping information, do some analysis, and create some tools for you all that will share which sites have which types of nature-based solutions as possibilities, and prioritize them on their feasibility and their resilience value, their ecological value. And we'll gather one more time, probably in May, to share those results with you and have another discussion about them. Then next year, next fall, summer, fall, winter, sort of until between June 2023 and June 2024, we will be developing some additional reporting and educational materials. The educational materials will include self-guided tours on some of the publicly accessible lands that will have QR codes placed around that people can learn about nature-based solutions and what they're looking at. And then, so for the next meeting, please, in the next couple weeks, think about locations that you notice as you're traveling around your community where climate impacts are happening, and places that you think could use some enhanced resilience, and what the priorities and values are most important to you for choosing locations. So at the next core team meeting 2, we'll present a synthesis, some more synthesis of all this information and mapping about sites, and Linnean will present some additional findings from continued community engagement, and we'll learn a little bit more about ecological climate resilience and how to figure that out. And then we will we'll have some breakout groups, and we'll go into the breakout rooms, and each breakout room will be one of the communities. So the Hudson folks will go to the Hudson room, the Framingham folks to Framingham room, and Natick to Natick room. And then within your own community, we'll have a map that you can look at on the screen, and we'll go through some of the ideas people have about priority sites in the town, and have a within town discussion of, well, of these sites that have come up in the discussions, which ones do we really want to focus on? Which ones do we want to have the technical team go to and have on-site discussions about what potential nature-based solutions could happen there? And in each site walk, we typically are able to go to about 8 to 10 sites in the one day. And so that's sort of where we're headed. And I can stop the share. And
great. Pam, you looked like you wanted to say something. Anybody else want to close out? Nope. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Any other last questions?
And again, we just want to thank everyone for taking your time this evening. This is a really important discussion for your community, and you're making a real contribution by participating. And thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thanks a ton.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and we hope you all come back. And again, if you know anybody else who'd want to participate in the next core team meeting, they can watch this recording and just send us their information, and you know, we'll get them the invitations.
Great.
Well done.
All right, thanks
Okay.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone have a good night.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Bye.
And I've got to stop the recording, so, okay.